Good morning, all. Welcome to Madison County Fire Department. We want to start off with thanking them for allowing us the opportunity to go ahead and meet here. This morning, we're going to be doing a volunteer subcommittee meeting, and this was something that was new and enacted from the Kings Court meeting. It was something that we saw there was a need for based on the number of volunteer incentive participation. And so we want to really just dive into what things that we knew were coming, but how can we make this better for volunteers? So we figured that, let's start by creating this subcommittee. We're missing one other person at this time who is actually en route. It's going to be about 45 minutes late, but we didn't want to delay it any longer, so we felt that we'll get started with this. We're hoping that we can get a lot of good ideas, good dialogue on how we can make this better for our volunteers and for the volunteer incentive program to be successful for the state and for each one of our firefighters, so that way nobody's left behind it. So with that, Director Zimmerman.
The three committee members are Stephanie Boatwright, Zimmerman, and then Porter Green, who's not here to come, and their vice chair, Brooke got to sit in on this place right now.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start first with the numbers of the volunteer education set. As we've seen over the past 3 years, numbers have declined. And so it's been a concern not only for us as a commission, but also for Commissioner Bell and also the state fire marshal. Because as we know, back in 21, I believe, when this was first pushed in front of the volunteers, we had a great year that year because at that point, the commissions that were afforded to the volunteers was basically any documented training that took place during the course of that year was accepted, with the belief that, or with the rule coming into play the following year, where a program had to be submitted by October 1st, just like on the career side. And then moving with that, we understand that it's hard for the volunteer departments today to be able to push a program out to the commission for approval by October 1st. And the reason being is because how many volunteer departments actually have a full-time training officer? Because those on the career side that have the training officers, we know it's an 8-hour job, Monday through Friday, and there's a lot that goes into it. So on the volunteer side, they're not afforded that opportunity because of time constraints with having career or full-time jobs outside of the fire service. And so today it's what can we do to make this easy for them in order to be successful in the EIP program. And so that's, like I said, going back to, this is one of the reasons why we created the subcommittee, so we can talk about these problems and try to figure out the best way moving forward to make it successful for everyone. The numbers, like I said at the beginning, they've gone down each year significantly, and it's concerning. And so I'm happy to see those of you in attendance that also represent volunteer departments, because we want to get your feedback and how we can help turn this back around, make it easy. But remember, this money is also still tied to the education. So it's not that it's a grant. It's not that it's just, hey, you show up, you get money. No, it's tied to 30 hours of training within the department. So now the question is, how best can we serve the volunteers by meeting that 30 hours of training and then them being able to move forward and being able to receive that money?
The one thing I would like to propose is actually do away with the 3 people program altogether. Because talking with EMS and how they do business, although obviously EMS is fire plays all together, but when an agency is hosting a class and it is awarded CPU, it has to be approved by the medical director. EMS board has no idea what is being so it doesn't have to go before this to get approved. So back to kind of what Bill was talking about with, letting departments train over the course of the year, then submit a roster. This will allow them that opportunity to hopefully take advantage of whatever training, department training that they're doing and get credit for it. Some departments don't know exactly what they're going to be training on. I know even for the career department, it's hard sometimes to plan out what they're going to do for the next year, and they still end up having classes. They still end up changing dates. So why not give them the opportunity to say, hey, we're going to participate and allow them to teach whatever they so do over the course of the year and turn in those rosters so that we can give them $1,000 credit.
So to give a little history, when this was presented to the commission by the, I refer to it as the Hill, but Nashville, and they wanted us to roll out this program for the volunteers. We basically had approximately 3 or 4 months to put an emergency rule in place to enact this in order for it to be able to take place. And as the director mentioned about being able to take that daily training or that monthly training that the volunteer department do and utilize that as the training component for recorded documented training. That's how we handled it that first. When we were creating these rules, one of the things that we took into account was that every volunteer department, or for the most part, we believe every volunteer department does at least 4 hours of training every month. Am I, with those that are representing volunteer departments out there, am I incorrect in that thing? Okay, so if I have 4 hours of documented training each month, 4 times 12 is 48. There's 48 hours of training that's right there that could be utilized towards these 30 hours. Am I incorrect in my thinking? No. So as we were looking at this, that's where we came into the different caveats that we added into it. One of the caveats was we took the maximum time that you can claim for hazmat from 16 hours and we eliminated that. So there was no cap on how many hazmat hours could be used for. And the reason being is because we as the commission, we're a certifying agency. We're not a training agency, but we're a certifying agency. And our goal is to certify firefighters. And how do we do that? By giving other opportunities for you to reach your certifications. Right? That's why all the classes have to be, all certifications have to have classes approved by the commission in order to be able to sit for these tests. So when we took the hazmat out, that was so that a volunteer department, if they wanted to do hazmat operations this year for 40 hours, they could claim all 40 of those hours for their education incentive package instead of having that cap of 16. But we also have the substitution portion that comes into play. So if somebody gets a commission certification for that year, they automatically qualify. So even if they do a hazmat awareness class for 8 hours, they're still accomplishing the 30 hours through the substitution of that commission certification, and they qualify.
Okay. So with the substitution, what I'm proposing, it would take out the need for substitution altogether. There would be no need for substitution for an FSC certification, college degree, or any TEMA classes. If we just allow them to claim the training that they've done over the course of the year, that would take out the need for that. And that would make some processes easier on our office as well as these individuals' houses.
I will have to agree, substitutions are a pain, and I don't like doing them if I don't have to. And that's why I actually do 150, 200 hours in my program because I don't do makeup classes, but I definitely see the benefit of doing away with the substitution, where it goes back to when we decided to create this and we had the conversations about what we could do. Is it best for us to revert back to that first year and just accept reported, documented training for the volunteer side in order for that to be more streamlined for them to be able to get this EIP money for them? So
If it was to be due, if we were to take out pre-approval and also all the testing, it would be a pretty significant overhaul on chapter 7.
anything you'd like to add?
Well, I know another issue is a lot of the issue passing into the, and that's delaying them getting the required firefighter one again. And I know at the last meeting we discussed maybe doing a volunteer firefighter certificate for them to achieve. I didn't know if anybody researched that.
So one of the things that I had proposed in Kingsport was going to a volunteer firefighter certification. And what that would encompass would be 16-hour basic 64 live fire. But as we know, if you're teaching your 64-hour class, it's replicating what's included in 16. The history of 16-hour was to give departments the opportunity to put somebody on a fire truck today before they actually went into 64, because as we know, not everyone has the resources available where I can hire 5 people today and start basic 64 tomorrow. It's just not there. And that's where that 16-hour came in, was it gave me the opportunity to give them those 5 main chapters that covered history, PPE, tools and equipment, codes, safety, thank you, to allow me the opportunity to put them on the fire truck today while I'm waiting on starting that 64-hour class. So there's been confusion of, well, if I have somebody who has a basic 64 certificate, they don't have a 16, why? And this is a conversation that the director and I had last week. And this is where that comes from. That 16-hour per state law states that they have to have this. But if we hire 5 people today and we start basic 64 tomorrow, well, they're getting their 16-hour included in their 64-hour class, because it's just copying those same classes over again. And so where we're going with this is, what does a volunteer firefighter Tennessee issues look like? Well, if they have 64, they have live fire, we could look at giving them this certificate in lieu of doing that firefighter 1. Now, granted, it's not the IFSAC firefighter, right? But this is basically would be only a state certificate stating that they met the minimum training requirements per state law. Josh?
Scott and Heather as well. I know we've had a lot of discussion around this, and they all know the rules far better than I do. But if we were to make a big change and go back to firefighter 1 requiring HMA, firefighter 2 requiring HMO, what would be? I've heard a lot of reasons why that can't be done, but what would be the financial?
Can't, because it's an NFPA thing. It's voted the NFPA in 2001 instance that it has HMA and HMO have to, they have their JPRs that they have to meet before they're eligible to test for firefighter 1. So it's not even a Tennessee thing, it's an NFPA.
And this certificate that he's discussing has nothing to do with volunteers that want to progress to actually get their HMA, HMO, firefighter 1, firefighter 2, that might want to or pursue their certification. Because they give them the opportunity to meet the maximum requirements for that stuff.
Because right now, we have volunteers that would meet the that are required to have their firefighter one prior to 5 years of active service.
Right.
So if we replace that firefighter one requirement with this Tennessee volunteer firefighter requirement, because obviously we have a lot of volunteers today that they have no desire to get in their firefighter, or they've been in the service for so long that they may not be able to do it and they're just happy driving, right? Or they may be an auxiliary. And so the days of them actually going inside and being an interior firefighter are behind them and they have no desire for that.
So what's your vision on if we created this outside of the 1654 line burn, like, is there any extra training that's going to go? Because I mean, if we're just creating a Tennessee specific certification and it's encompassing all that, what's the point? Because we've already got people that are confused now that say they're coming to us at 1654 going, oh, we already got firefighter one, let's go, friends. So we don't. So what's your vision of that?
Well, if we back it up even further, a lot of people, and this goes along with what you're saying, a lot of people thought that if they did 16, that was firefighter one. Or, I'm sorry, if they did basic 64, that was firefighter one. If they did live fire, that was firefighter two. That was a belief for a long time, and especially amongst the volunteers. And so I think no matter how we do this, no matter how black and white we make this, we're still going to have confusion because we have a lack of communication at this place. And that's one of the problems that we have is lack of communication. And when I say that is a matter of how much information we do and how much we're not pushing out. And it's an act of Congress, as I can speak for the director here, for her to try to push something out in FireCom, she has to go through 8 different steps or 8 different people in order to push a blog, just a little blurb out concerning what's new in the commission. And that's where some of the holdup in the communication does come from. But my vision, to answer your question, is if we replace the firefighter one requirement with this Tennessee volunteer firefighter certification, they would still have to do their 30 hours of training every year. It's basically just taking that one concept out or that one requirement out. And we could actually still leave it there because it could be 4, right? But like I said, when we go back and we look at some of these volunteers, there's no desire for them to go interior. They just may want to drive the trucks. They may just want to be able to hump hose. But for us to put the requirement of you have to be firefighter one in order to be able to continue to receive this, I think that's where we're going to see big holdups.
Can I add something real quick? So one thing that I see right now, we're stuck on fire one.
Okay, who you are?
Greg Rudolph, State County Fire. One thing that we're stuck on firefighter one. Put hazmat in place. Because hazmat, there's a lot of people that can't do 40 hours of hazmat.
There's a lot of departments that actually don't do hazmat
They don't
whatsoever.
do hazmat at all. So let's put hazmat into place with this. They may be able to do 4 hours or 8 hours of HMA, but that 40-hour HMO comes into play too. I mean, we've done 2 classes so far, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
And maybe had 5, 7 people at the most. They're just not in it.
That seems to be the biggest hang up of getting into the firefighter one.
It is.
That's about.
But we're stuck. We're stuck talking about fire one. Back up and point.
That's why I brought up HMO. It's holding everybody up.
Me, I don't know about anybody else. HMO, as far as permission goes, is the hardest thing to pass. Well, since it's been changed back, well, next to others, there's others, but it has the highest fail rate in the state.
Difficult.
It's difficult. It has the highest fail rate in the state. No matter how you look at it.
Bill, you can look at our numbers in State County and see how many rentals they have. I've got a lot of people that are not gonna go to firewall, that are top dog, and I put up against anybody on pumping, driving, doing operations on the scene that are not interior, I don't wanna lose. This is pushing them away.
David Whitaker, Decatur County. I want to make sure that you understand. I just put a 64-hour class through. I put one through a year, and my largest one last year, 24 people. I got Trevor here. Been on the fire department for 10 years. Okay? We finally get him in a 64-hour class, 64 live fire. Now we're an exempt county. So I got the email or the memo from Tina saying, Trevor doesn't have the 16-hour class. So he's not eligible for this year's state pay, even though he's got the 64 and the live burn, he's not eligible for the state pay. And I've got others that are, we call them drivers, and 10 years or 15 years on the job that have gone through, they sit through every class with me, but they're physically not able to be an interior firefighter, nor would I ever want them to be a firefighter. They sit through every class. This gentleman's getting paid, this one is not, because they don't meet these requirements. I understand you need these requirements, educational incentives. I think this is a wonderful program. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is a great program. But I speak for the rural of the rural. I've got less people in my entire county than he's got in his, in his city. My guys work at the gas station. And for me to get them to 64 with a live burn, in 10 years, I've been able to train 45 of them out of my 60 people. But come year after next, none of those, all 45 of those, with the exception of myself and one other, will not be eligible for this incentive pay. And when the firefighter one rolls around. I've been talking to Mark Boyd about trying to get a class down there. It's hard to try to get, for these types, to even get 5 or 6 that are able to commit. One more thing I just want to throw in. I had the opportunity to talk to Director Zimmerman a while back. Instead of getting rid of the pre-authorization or whatnot, I said, why doesn't, and I know the answer, why doesn't the state or the commission or the fire academy have a set 30-hour curriculum with PowerPoint and stuff that his department may not adopt it, his, but my little Spring Creek department in Perry County that's got 5 guys may say, we want to participate, and here is the 30-hour curriculum that we can follow and watch PowerPoint and take the test and work toward. I think that trying to get more of those type of volunteers into this education is what's important. Again, I speak for the rural of the rural.
Steve, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because like I said, there was some confusion. Because in state law, it states that a firefighter has to have that 16 hours, they have to have that 64 hours as part of their minimum skill. And as we all, as training officers, or those of us that have been in the fire service, we all know that that 16 was what it was meant for. It was meant for you, your department, right? That if I brought somebody on today, I need that warm body today. So how do I get them on that fire truck? And that was by doing that 16-hour class. And then by the time they go ahead and start that 64 hour, well, it's
Right.
just duplicating what's in that 16. Because we're covering everything in 16, we're covering it all over again in 64. And as I've had the conversation with directors, if you see a 64-hour certificate, you have to automatically assume 16 is there because it's already taught again in 64.
It's not indicated, doesn't say.
It also too, because of the same rule, the volunteer firefighter must complete the 16-hour introductory fire and emergency course and 64-hour basic course and commitment to one work. We have it written in the rule that it's the state has to have all 3. So if we were to take it out, if we, as you and I talked about, if we took out the 16-hour component, if it is replicated in 64, there's no need for it to begin with.
So let's talk about rule rules. We're in an anomaly right now because we actually submitted rule changes in February of last year. January, we did the rule hearing, and then it worked its way through, and there's lots of layers of government that has to go through. But typically, or historically, when we do a rule change, within approximately 4 months, that rule's enacted. This has just been a different type of year that's taken place. And it's because we went through all 7 chapters of the rule book. We touched every single chapter. So it was a huge undertaking, which helped delay this. But typically, when we do a rule change, we're looking at maybe 1 chapter or maybe 2 chapters at the most. And that's where it's able to move through GovOps and through the Secretary of State's office and the governor's office, and it's able to quickly go into rule. We have not been able to open up rule changes on the ones we're waiting on yet, because that's what we've been doing, waiting on these other rules to come into play so we can start working on, well, let's go ahead and fix what we need to fix next. We have a running list that Maribeth has been keeping tabs with, so as soon as we have, we already know where we're starting. And so with this is one of them that we need to add, because it's frustrating. I know it, I get it. And at the end of the day, I want your department to be successful. And so that's why we're having this meeting. What else can we do to make it easy for the volunteers? When you talk about the CAN program, like I said at the beginning, we're a certifying agency. PFACA is the training side. So it would be up to PFACA whether or not they put together a program for the volunteers for that 30 hours. We can't do that. That's not our job. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not our job. But if a program comes to us for approval and it meets the benchmark, we have no problem approving it. You know, there was something else that was my mind. I'll come back to it. But what other ideas can we solicit from you as our stakeholders? What else can we do to make this easy?
The David Doris Jackson Fire and Tennessee Fire Association. Everything that's been said here, I've heard from one end of the state to the other, top to bottom. But since it started, the intent of the law, we all know what it was. I went back to what we call notes from meetings, where the commissioner made a statement and argued that certification. I know it is, I didn't have the certification. That's what we're talking about. We all know that. The same issue Chief back here talking about, I first started teaching for the fire academy years ago. And the first place that I went to was class in County. And when I sat and met with Chief at that time, his statement was, hey, I've got these old firefighters who donated land, built the building, bought trucks, they're still active. They can't crawl, they can't do live fire. But they don't come to the training. No guys can call. That's out there. Absolutely. We have eliminated that generation from the entire process. They don't want their drivers, but that's all they do in the field firefighter. Ever. Because that's not what they're there for. And the intent, we're always here with the intent of the law. I was training way back in 1964, like you said. If you want to take them now, and we're trying to work out a yard, do it 16. So you can do it 64. And somewhere along the line, a year later, impact came out with, you know, that's what it got so they put. All kind of fire departments support that thing. They use. And the confusion part is going to be still real, because I still get volunteer firefighters that want to be a hazmat technician when they come to my department. Well, I've already got awareness out. No, you don't have to do this awareness out. Much less hazmat technician certification. And then they haven't done their training to the options that you said they were certified. The people with conflict, they
I don't disagree.
One more. Emergency rules, and it's not having this, it's not part of this thing,
It is.
but when it expires, you're still stuck a year and a half later. And nobody can tell me how long our part. It's in two different places, two different ways.
Right. So in chapter 7, it is 10 years. And I think it's in chapter 4, where it still states 36 months for 3 years. One of the things in the new rules is we're going to months and not years.
But legal holds the commission to the harshest side, not, let's hear it to the side of the firefighter.
No customer service.
What?
No customer service. That would what I'm hearing.
But when legal holds what the rules, I can't wait there. I agree. If I go to PDOT, no, I write documentation, I say, thank you so much.
Was it there when we got tasked with great world, we had literally 2 months to grab something, and that was across the state. Multiple people.
Y'all did an amazing job.
And we made it for 10 years, but we were focused on that chapter at that time to get this program so that it could get paid. That the other, that's why the board was working on the other chapters, but we had to get this pushed out, so. Because they actually got put into effect after it was already passed.
So my last question is, why the commission can put this rule you have to follow? Rules will say the mayor, he decided to move out of home. The second year we still have. But my God, we're gonna hold these other rules. That's where the fire service is. And that's not the only one. It's the year previous to record. People are not no seats anymore. I went over that, I'm not sure they don't. All of the years. And then outvoted on the way to do things. I've even been told, sitting in DC, we don't have to change our rules, you like policy. If you want, my response, remember was, you are the governing body that should be giving the standards to my chief, not to tell my chief that they say that I'm doing. And it has all caught up. I've also said personally and said, when you're gone, I'm also when you're gone, when you guys are gone, we're going to be stuck with what's up here. That's what it was. Not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just people felt. Problem is, it can be functioning for those 2 years of the war. I have had conversations with my chief about dropping certification in my department promotion of my department. My recruit said, when it got canceled 6 times, where's
If we can keep, we've had conversations, if we can keep this towards the volunteer right now, and let's discuss that more in work session.
Yes, sir.
Where we have the rest of the commission with us. I want to keep this focused on where we're at and what we're here for. Josh, do you have something?
I agree with everything and all the ideas that have been shared. When the legislation was drafted for the EIP, there were several versions of it out there. My version had really just thinking about how difficult it would be for some firefighters to move through the level. You have the minimum state training standard, you got $400 a year. When you get firefighter 1, you got $600 a year. Firefighter 2, you got $800 a year. Again, put that in line with what career was getting, but also to have a path for firefighters that might never get past the minimum state training standard. That amendment was not one of the amendments that moved forward. I lost that a little bit. I still think that would have been a good way to do it. Very good, 3 different paths. And the interim time, because I do think we're going to see legislation, minimum training standards, and the EIP in the next session or next session. But in the interim time, if we did a rule that just said in order to qualify, you had to meet the minimum training standards, not create some other certification option out there, but in the short term, to say you have to meet training standards, and here's what we mean by that. That would simplify a lot of it. give us an opportunity to try to more slowly clean up some of the other stuff on the backside and eliminate the hazmat issues that I think that would be the cleanest, simplest way to put it. Move everybody as far down the football field as I would like to see it. And, you know, I want to motivate everybody towards firefighter one. Somewhat that slows that down, but it also makes it possible for a lot more people. The other completely separate related issue that we talked about for the last couple of years, and I know Commissioner Farley has said we want to get this before this year, but it definitely is affecting us somewhat the way David's issue is affecting them this year is the 3-year rule. The way I have been told consistently in the past was that that would be applied based on your 3rd year in the program. So you could not qualify for continue getting EIP unless you met the standard by the 3rd year, not by your 3rd year on the department. And that's a big deal for us because I've got a lot of our old guys. It's taken 3 years to get them motivated to want to participate in the program. They got hazmat awareness, so they got another certification this year that would have qualified them, hopefully create a little bit of excitement, hopefully keep them motivated to go keep going to the program. But because of the 3-year rule, they're not able to qualify this year. I'm probably not going to recommend them to keep going next year because they didn't get this year. So that, I think, what I view as the commission's intent, and that was originally passed, and how what always applied was their 3rd year of participation in the EIP program. That's still their 3rd year on the department. They might have 10 years of doing that.
Right. It's from the start of their process of the program.
Right.
The EIP program. That's correct.
And just for a clarification, the 3 specific ones that I have that completed the 64 and the live burn, they are not eligible for state pay for this year because they did not have the 16. Is that correct? Or do I need to put them in as if they are eligible?
So luckily we have legal here.
So there's another, the one that told us about that exactly. And so.
Okay.
I want to make sure I include more specific question and I want to ask everybody. But that is an issue that we're aware of for one of the firefighters and all.
We're an exempt county. In fact, we're a distressed county, according to the governor's law. But we are an exempt county. When the law was written about the firefighter training, you know, we maintain that quote unquote exempt status.
You're talking about the legislative staff that are part of it.
Correct. Correct. We are not required. We offer it and some take it, but not all. Most opt just go directly into the program and get the line.
I don't want to give you an answer. I don't know. I want to have this and make sure I get you right.
Thank you.
What I can read you from TCA code is any full-time, part-time, or volunteer firefighter hired, and this is TCA 424.112. Any full-time, part-time, or volunteer firefighter hired or accepted as a firefighter on or after July 1st, 2009 by a department recognized under Title 68, Chapter 102, Part 3, must meet the following minimum training requirements. The firefighter must have previously completed or must complete after joining the fire department a minimum of 16 hours of initial training developed by the Tennessee Fire Service and Enforcement Academy, firefighting procedures and techniques, or complete equivalent training approved by the Tennessee Commission on Firefighting Personnel Standards and Education before being allowed to actively fight the fire. And the within 36 months after hire or acceptance date as a firefighter. The firefighter must have completed or must complete after joining the fire department the basic and live firefighting course offered by the Texas Fire Services Academy or an equivalent course. The following firefighters, this is subsection B, the following medically or physically unable to complete the training requirements. However, the fire department may not allow a firefighter to use active firefighting operations. So that's straight out of state TCA law, which then we have to follow. It sounds like that's something that we need to push the legislation on that 36 months component, or is that something that we need to keep and just have the opportunity because PPACA has resources available. Unfortunately, you haven't been able to take advantage of them as much as you'd like. But PPACA is offering a lot of free classes, and Basic 64 is one of them, to volunteer fire departments. And I think, Chief, with your situation, because of how far you're at, I think it's the restriction of having enough instructors to be able to come out and do that.
But I teach the 64 myself. I don't mean keep back to become teacher. I teach it in-house myself.
Right.
They're missing that 16 component.
Right.
They're going directly into the 64. We start a class 1st of January every year.
And like we talked about earlier, we know what the intent of that 16 is. It's for you to be able to get that person on a truck today while waiting for that 64 class to start later. And I think that's where what we're talking about here this morning, where we have a lot of confusion and issues. Because once again, 16 is replicated in the 64. That's why with the larger departments that we rookies, it's already included in that 16. That 16 hours included in the rookie school as part of that 64, which is 200 and some odd hours. And so we need to figure out how to get past this component. Remember that? How we can get past this 16, because once again, if a person has 64, everything that's in 16 is in 64. It's just like a small condensed version to get somebody on a truck today.
That's just never been the way we've always been traffic monitoring, that three steps to get that to be active. Fixing. I know there are some grandfather situations. When somebody was not expecting, it may be a little thing, it may be that.
I do it through podcast.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
And the county, they would require it.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm just saying that that's where some of the language confusion is.
Add one thing, the county's like this,
It's an exempt county.
this county. You have to think of it all critical like I do. It's also does not make it people do a 16-hour class before they go back to conflict in the same state. If it's a top part at the end, the academy should say there's no regret.
The academy doesn't require a prereq. I have that intent status.
Well, there's not a prereq for 64. 16 is not a prereq for 64.
We've gotten the answer before in this room, previous administration, so I don't want to hold.
Right.
No, but it said, the fire chief certifies that everything is our class, covered in our class, or the rookie class, that's all we need to get qualified. I'm not sure that's the current answer, I know they'll get that clarified. But
Maybe that's the year and then.
I know that's what they have to
And I like that as an answer. It's not that you just didn't do the 6 things, you incorporated it. Yeah. In fact, I ended up with about 80 hours in my 64. We tried to incorporate, additional things that may need.
So I got one thing as far as the 3 years, because it's been, you got 3 years and you got 10 years. There's some fire chiefs running around here right now, that's telling people 5 years. The firefighter, or live burn. So there's a big misconception. You wasn't here Thursday when we talked about this. Director, you were. The 10-year rule, once it's in effect, whenever it goes into effect, will be across the board. So this will include career and volunteer, not just volunteer.
So just where the 10-year came from. When we talked about this rule change, I want to say it was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, it was through Jackson. And the question was posed to Director Elliott. How often is the standard for live fire changed? And he said, well, I can tell you it hasn't been changed in at least 10 years. So that's where that 10 number came from. Now, should we have put our number on there looking back in hindsight? Probably not, because once again, for those of us who have been in the service for as long as we have, how many times have we seen that standard change in our career? You were my proctor at TFACA back in 2003 for live burn. How much has it changed since 2001?
So,
This year, everybody's putting on there, what I feel is a big problem. Because if somebody comes to our department, they've only been away for 4 years. I may run them back through stuff because they don't know what they're doing. They forgot a lot of stuff in 4 years. Putting that year rule about the authority having jurisdiction to be able to make that determination, they'll come in and say, I'm good for 10 years. Paperwork shows it. Authority having jurisdiction should have some say so in that matter, on that training. And the volunteer versus the career, I've done both. Now, big city career, now volunteer department. I think we're separating them even more than what they were before. We're in this together, and the career, it's already bad enough the career and the volunteer don't get along. Okay? And then we start putting different rules on volunteers because they have to have firefighter one. Like Greg said, why can't we do some type of training that the volunteers can get within that 3 years to continue their incentive pay versus career's going to get their training that they get. So we're separating, we're making it because career's going to hate the volunteers because they get longer time or they don't have to do as much and stuff like that. My 2 cents.
Well, and I appreciate that. And that's why when I mentioned that Tennessee volunteer firefighter certification, if you will, was if we put that in place, because once again, we have volunteers that will never want to go to the career side. But if we issue this certificate because they met the minimum requirements, which is the 1664 live fire or just 64 live fire, that now just says, hey, they met the minimum requirement. Now it's up to your departments to continue that education. And, going back to when we made these emergency rules, when we started we wanted to make it as easy as possible for the volunteer department. That's why when it comes to online training, it's still 20 hours. 20 hours of 30 hours can be done online for volunteers. That's more than half of your class time can be done online. Whereas on the career side, it's a maximum of 20 hours out of 40 hours. So we didn't touch that because once again, it gave the flexibility to the volunteers in order, to be able to do more classes, do online, free through PM Fire if that's who you choose to go. But giving you that other road map or that other route to be able to achieve or be successful in that 30 hours.
You know, is this education center, and I don't know, was it designed for interior firefighters?
It was designed for firefighters.
Interior firefighters, because I know there's a lot of outside that know how to fight grass fires, brush fires, that help on the thing, because it seems like it's designed for interior only firefighters. Because if you have to do 64 to become an interior firefighter, that's the only way you get it. Okay? We got, in the volunteer service, I guarantee you, there's 2/3 of it are not interior firefighters. And they deserve the same recognition as the ones that go inside. They do just as much, if not more. So why are we dead set on 64-hour live burn? There's a lot of them that do that. I know they can't go through our live burn 64-hour class, because I run them through just like career interior firefighters. Right. There's a lot of guys that can't do that, or girls that can't do that. Okay, why can't we design something that still gets them their training, whether it be a 40-hour driver training or something like that? And I mean,
And to answer that question, let's go back to statutory. State law doesn't differentiate between interior or exterior. It's firefighter. That's all it is firefighter. So now what we would have to look at is we want to go down that rabbit hole with statutory differentiating between an interior firefighter and an exterior firefighter.
no, I think we need to change the training. I don't think we need to go down the separate them. Just give multiple different types of training that they can get, where either or can go through it and still get it. You know, I mean, you're right. There is no difference. They're all firemen. But some firemen can't do that.
You're saying take out the requirement of 1664 live burner, and kind of like what I was proposing.
Like, yes, ma'am.
So I'm gonna pose a question. We all are talking about problems, things we don't agree with. If we were to fix it today, what would it look like? What would you want it to reflect?
Go back to years ago, NFPA made a huge change. All that followed suit. Even in the fire commission rules, what makes a firefighter on the first station is different than what makes a firefighter before state money. It talks about background, everything. Authority having jurisdiction. You should decide who you want to hire, what role they want to do for, and their firefighter. That would fix it.
To allow each entity to determine what they're going to train on.
I don't have no problem submitting it. I have no problem.
No, the class, what they classify our firefighters as. That's
So let me throw a, we have to keep it in here enough. When you do a 64-hour class, those who don't do personal rescue, do roll in those scenarios within their career path. When they do wild fire training, those who don't interior firefight, let them be pump operators, safety operators, do they do on real fire. But there's still a lot of fire training in their role. There's nothing that says we can't do that. Because I have to operate a class, that's what I need to do.
And I've been working on some changes to minimum training standards to kind of create a pathway for a support firefighter role. Even best case scenario, that's a year or two down the road. So working on with what we have today, if we just required that we meet the minimum training standards, of which there is an exemption in there for people who are not physically able to do it, but requires your department to say they can't do anything to the firefighting. There already is kind of an exception there. If we just required that as the minimum and we're qualified, if that's 64-hour class in the live burner unless you don't medically qualify. Set that as a minimum bar and then do the 30 hours based on just turning those hours in afterwards. Is there anybody that would be opposed to that standard? is at least for a step for the next couple of years. You know, this is where we're trying to get to.
That would make more sense, trying to do that, than the hoops that we're jumping through right now. Because the hoops that we're jumping through right now, is crippling our volunteers. Crippling others.
And your numbers reflect that. I don't know what the total number of volunteers in this state is, but those that are participating in this incentive are probably a fraction of who would quote unquote be eligible.
Less than a fraction.
Less than a fraction.
No, in 23, there was only like 900 something submissions
The entire state.
from the entire state. And I think it's gone down even. I think I want to say 24.
Was when there were positive, it's just too complicated.
Yeah.
The positives we
And in that fifth year, those 30 or 40 that I've got to this level will not be eligible. I can't get them to that firefighter one time. I say I can't, I will strive, but majority of them, I can't get to that level.
That's gonna be a problem.
No,
That's gonna be a problem.
I can't speak for the fire chief in the state, but I can tell you, for me, is the you're talking about, when I find somebody else is not able, I'm still gonna require that they go through the training, and I'm gonna use the hell out of them, you know, in other ways. And I want them to be fully trained. So I wouldn't just say, hey, you're not disabled, we're gonna sign you off and teach you the money anyway, don't worry about it like these other people. No, I'm not gonna be that person. But yes, ma'am, it's gotta have something that entices these volunteer firefighters to do more. And to sit there and look at his fellow brother that he's on the fire scene with, but just because he's not going in that burning building like some of us stupid ass does all the time for years, you know, doesn't mean he's less of a firefighter. It means he's got a different job on it. And we've got to highlight those guys, keep them in the program, to keep them in the fire service. We draw a lot of people. And I can honestly say it wasn't from the administration. You know, it's for the simple fact of all the rules and stuff that we're putting on these guys that work and have families and all that, still want to do this, but can't do what we require them to do to get a simple, about a bit of money that they're deserved, because they go to the training night, the 4-hour training night. They get all of it, but they can't get fired. They can't get, sometimes they're not physically able to get 64 live fire. It's my opinion.
That's why we created the subcommittee. We wanna see what we can do to make the program successful.
I know we all talk on the potential of change, but I think this is that phenomenal where not so good fire certification that
That's what,
The education is everything.
so it's tied to
30 years or 30 hours of training.
but that's just training, that's not really FFC certification.
No, we tied it to a certification because us being a certifying agency, we wanted to have that as, like at the beginning, our job is to improve the firefighters of Tennessee. And so by having this education incentive, by tying it to the certification of firefighter 1, it was, we want you to work towards this, which we're accomplishing our job because now we're certifying these firefighters, but now it's backfiring on them. Because,
Losing more.
right,
So, I know you're talking about the volunteers, but they can't put it in. Even if it is.
no, but basically what it's saying is inside the state of Tennessee, that volunteer firefighter has accomplished those minimum basic classes. That's before you joined the fire service, we used to have Tennessee state issued certificates before the acting program. Okay? And,
Even that same state law is in 35 counties.
right.
But there's nothing that prevents y'all from requiring that for the program, you know. In the grant program, they still get extra points if they meet the minimum state standard, even if they're in the next time. And that was the approach on this as well. You can require that standard for a different program.
So we were having a side conversation here about the education incentive. How it was like we just got done talking, it was us as a commission that tied it to the certification. But the bill was actually for the 30 hours of training for volunteers. So, correct. So what I'm hearing is, first and foremost, let's take away the minimum training requirements for the education incentive on the volunteer side. And then the second thing I'm hearing is do away with the fire, making it mandatory for the firefighter 1 certification at the 5-year mark to be able to continue moving forward. Is that correct? Is that what the vision is?
I don't think the minimum training requirement, I mean, we're all getting the 30 hours. I don't think it's.
No, I meant the 64.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, okay.
To me, the fire one, in most cases, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not attainable
Because of the HMO.
because of the HMO.
Yeah.
It's not attainable.
Well, I'm gonna add into that, even the practical firefighter 1, there are so many practical skills which they have to know 100% of that they will never use in their own departments. They don't have to hold roll. It's little things, but it adds up to a lot of people. So why have to be testing on these things when we don't do it? And I hear that same complaint.
I think once they get to the HMO test, firefighter 1 test.
But it just gets past that.
Of course, my guys need rural pump operation, rural water shuttle operation, rural, manufactured homes. That's what my guys do. You know, we don't have high rise. We don't have we're a river community, but we have $1 million 3-story homes hanging off our river edge, and lots of them. My guys are looking at these. I try to incorporate that in my 64-hour class because that is unique to our county and our community. When I say $1 million home, $1 million 3-bedroom weekend home, it's not a hydrogen site.
So my 4 takeaways actually, is the AHJ should have say on what the firefighter status is, on who's a firefighter and who's not. Do away with the 1664 live fire requirement for the education incentive. Do away with the firefighter 1 certification time frame. Not meaning that they don't have to get it, but if they still want to go after it, they can, right? Just meaning tying it to the education incentive. And then accept documented training for that year without having to do pre-approval. Is that what it looks like in your mind? To make things easy to streamline this?
Well, I mean, in my mind, I still think by year 3, they should be able to meet the minimum training standard. But the third year of participation in the program, they should be able to meet the minimum training. I think when you get anybody through a 64-hour class, there is already a section of law that gives them a way to waiver the live burn. So I think that should still be a minimum standard that they haven't reached in 3 years. And I think from what we've heard today, most everybody's able to do
idea of a different money level. In other words, if you make these changes, and I'm still within my little department, I can get them 64. If I got a guy that wants to go to firefighter 2, give him 800 instead of the 600.
That's a statute thing. That's a statute. That's what.
Yeah,
That's just my opinion. I hate to say do away with this, do away with that, because I'm all for A. You know, I hate to do away with that.
Right.
But
So what if we kept the 1664 lot burn on a 36-month schedule? So within 36 months, every volunteer should have that minimum training in order to continue progressing through the VEIP.
64 live fire, not 16, 64 live fire.
I want to see if you really get it.
Volunteers do not get
They got 2.5.
and really didn't get that, because nobody knew what the rules were going to be until they said it. So every chief was told on the record for the previous, that we can't hold down the previous. You got 3 years. Well, when you look at it on paper, the way the government, you think of other than you now, last year. They got 2 years. That's where all this came up. Nobody knew this. Well, Rick Gardino kept on.
Oh, he and I had a numerous conversation. Yes.
And the director had this conversation. Previous directors have set up here at the meeting and told chiefs and everybody else on the phone and email, oh, CPR don't matter anymore. It's 10 years. It's this. Oh, we'll be passed by that day. Don't worry about it. And that's how we make the business. Right here.
And like I said earlier, it's just been an anomaly how long this rule process has actually taken for us.
So simple question. Can we make that immediate change waiver and give them 2 years? Then we tell them 1.5.
If we did it in the form of a motion in the commission meeting.
The waiver for everything.
The rule, there are certain statutes, and that's how we do it. I can't say that that was qualified. You have that right. When you're talking about asking commission to grant a waiver to the student in school, I think that was another policy.
People would be across the board.
It would be a blanket.
Yeah. And then that would go into it.
But can we create a waiver to cover the rules while we go through? Yeah. Right. Yeah, because if that's the case, if that's something that we can legally do, then we can get that addressed this week. Meeting.
I would say that right ahead of right now.
So you're saying a waiver of the firefighter one?
No.
That's what we're going, and then where's that big part?
Right here, what is it, CPR?
Yeah, I saw those emails going back and forth. This guy had CPR, but it was more than, you know, it ended before the end of the calendar year.
What we were told we were to do right now.
It is the intent of the commission that CPR is no longer required, but it's tied up in this rule change that we have not seen.
That's also the director told everyone that you.
I know, because we were anticipating that this rule change would have came into play months ago.
So if we got waiver of CPR, for live fire. Now, that will solve a lot of volunteers heading. Now.
Yeah, then all 15 of my guys would be eligible right now.
Marbeth is working on the answer for that, and it's something that can be done. So we're working on that part. We want to welcome Commissioner Green to the party. Free Kindle.
Best friend's house. Yeah. Exactly. It was outlined.
Commissioner Green, just for a recap, a couple of things that we discussed was that it would be best that the age create the status of what a firefighter in their department is. To do away with the required firefighter 1 certification at the 5-year mark. To have the, not 16, but to have the 64 live burn at the 36-month mark. And then to accept any documented training for that calendar year to use as training towards the EIP.
So that was gonna be my thing. I've done some research here recently. And with post accreditation and also the new EMS in-service standards, that's what they're doing. They're taking a set amount of hours that they're doing training in their department. They're recording it. Their training officer signing off on it, or their EMS director signing off on the test that they've completed this training. They're turning in the end. As long as they make their 30-hour requirement, they're getting their info. My personal opinion with volunteers and stuff is, in general, we're going to have to. There's no advantage. And that's the way it was the first year, because it kind of got flopped there and said, hey, we got to do this. We're going to find that happy medium, try to fix it. And that right there is until we can find a full-term, long-term commitment.
I think what we discussed today was a very good basis for that long-term commitment. Would you all agree?
What we want to say is that when we have 64 in my brain, there's right now the way the world are, within 36 months of becoming a firefighter at content. Not as a different program. Are you guys interested in discussing doing that same?
I would like to see it reflect the beginning of them starting the program itself. Yes. The individual.
Because there may be somewhere that they're not even considering looking at that program, and they may decide in a year, hey, I'm moving and I'm going to be a part of this department. It shouldn't hold them an issue because they've been a part of this other department.
But
So, to say that they were at one person, what different, then they'll go to another.
no, it will start from the time they receive the money their first time. They have 36 months from the first year they receive that money to meet the minimum requirement. Because they could be a part of this department for 5 years and not be a part of the EIP program. And then decide all of a sudden this year, I want to be a part of it. Well, guess what? You want to continue being a part of it, then you have to meet those minimum requirements within 36 months.
Read this out loud. Number 6, the date an individual became employed as a firefighter, or volunteered as a firefighter respectively, or participation in the education program, shall be paid without late. That is not what the yeah. They're saying it's they hired.
Right.
It does not say that.
No, it says from the date that,
First date of education.
correct, correct. I knew that's how we wrote it.
talk.
Not
People
required
be in
to.
trouble with time. No, not at all. That's the biggest thing. If you hear different from different people and they're like, oh, which one's the truth?
One of the conversations that the Director and I had recently also was pertaining to the Commission 101 class. It's been a minute since we've had that in West Tennessee. And that is something that is another avenue that we could utilize to push out the information as an update. So if we had our training officers come with at least one of those a year, at least we would stay updated with what new things are coming across on the commission if people are not afforded the opportunity to come to the commission.
One of my next questions is, anybody here on the Terry Windows? I don't know. I mean, once a year, every week, if all goes on to the main office, my God, you change out those volunteers. But he did this go over what money to this. He said, he went over every rule. Changes were, what money to change. But those that don't have an opportunity to come to these meetings, you're in the dark, those that work out.
Correct. And it's like the operator.
I know you
being
already
required.
read that. But even in the one-on-one class, we took one farm association that year. From one from Middle Tennessee, what the thing started. The client now walked out laughing because it was, don't worry about it, it's a rule. It wasn't a class. So they're working on what they were taught in the class. That's all they had.
You put those classes online. So, if we have to come.
So one of my overarching visions that I hope to, we're working on it right now, is to redo the website. And my goal is to create a landing place on there of how-to. And create how-to, you know, for anything from navigating your pages to navigating the rules, to just whatever questions that we get. That way, if you're not able to make these classes, these commission 101s or whatnot, that as a chief or training officer, you can say, hey, this is on the website, go review this, you know, if you've got questions, call the commission. Hopefully you can kind of alleviate some of the confusion that we have. But again, it's process.
There hasn't been anything helpful online.
I think it's been a little bit longer than 3 years.
Yeah.
Anything's been very helpful online. Think about what we talked about the other day. So we thought, the commissioner and myself, the director and the commissioner, all of us, we talked about the other day about trying to get email information where you get meeting requests. So that's going to go out this week to the fire chief. So they can forward it on to your training directors as well. We'll try to get that information out when you get the updated meeting, when we're going to meet, stuff like that as well. So I did work on that. We get that done probably tomorrow and get that out. So that'll help out a little bit too as well. Trying to recreate the email list.
Yeah, just currently right now, that's a whole lot, 1,400, where that goes.
There's got to be more than that.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to cover concerning volunteer education incentive at this time? Hearing none. I close the meeting of the subcommittee on volunteer education incentive.